But hello, everyone. Welcome to this first event of a very nice, big, fantastic program we have in store with Algorand, broadly called the Algorand Club, but with three different elements over the next roughly 12 months or so that should educate you about Algorand, about blockchain in general, get you involved in some hacking and some developing, and overall also if you have startups that you want accelerating and you want to take to the next level, from foundation to becoming something special, we will help you with that. But just a few kind of words before that. Today's agenda, I'm Anthony, I run Encode Club, which I'll tell you about in a moment. Many of you from Encode Club, so you know this already. I'll give you a quick overview. Then we have a fantastic presentation from Addie from the Algorand Foundation, and then we'll hand over for questions. The main purpose of this event is kind of to be an introductory to the whole series and an introduction about Algorand, for those who don't know about Algorand already. So a few words about Encode very quickly. We educate, support and back university and hacker talents in blockchain. A lot of you are from the various universities we work with across the world, so thank you very much for joining us. And in general, we do this in order to kind of bring the next generation of talent into blockchain, especially at this time where things are going great, things are very bubbly, things are very exciting. There's lots of innovation, but we need more talent in the space, and I'm excited to see you guys get involved. We do this across 6 fronts. Today is kind of more on the workshop side, but we also have some hackathons and accelerators planned. But everything you could possibly wish to do in blockchain or to learn about blockchain, we think we have covered for you. Less about this slide, but I know we have a lot of fantastic universities represented today. So thank you all for joining, and thank you all for continuing to support what we do at Encode Club and to kind of championing blockchain on the ground. But yeah, hopefully this will be, hopefully we see more universities join. And if you are a society that isn't officially part of Encode, do let us know. We'd love to get you onboarded. So a few words about Algorand, because we've been working with Algorand not just on this series, but actually for a while now across a few different programs. They first joined our Future of Blockchain hackathon back in, I'm tempted to say 2019, although 2019 doesn't feel a long time ago, but in a covered world it actually does. But they are the world's first pure proof-of-stake blockchain. It was founded by Silver Micali, who is a Turing Award winner and an outstandingly clever chap. I'm not going to kind of say too much about the kind of inner workings of Algorand, because that's one for Addie, but they are doing amazing things in the world of blockchain and have been great supporters of Encode, and we're delighted to kind of tell you more about Algorand throughout this series and during this event. So what happens in this series? So there's 3 things. Today is the start of the Educate series. We'll be teaching you the basics of blockchain, the basics of Algorand, all the way through to hopefully you're being quite a good level by the end of the program, which is roughly in June. We then go on to a hackathon where you can test out your newly acquired skills to build stuff, and that will be a 10-week hackathon. And for the very best of you, we'll be doing an accelerator in roughly the autumn, going into the winter. We try and get you into building actual startups and things that have long-term potential within the Algorand ecosystem. The timeline of this roughly looks like about 12 events on the education side, 10 weeks hackathon, 10 weeks accelerator. This is a very compressed version. It's roughly going on for the next year. So if there'll be, depending on your schedules and your availability, there'll be a chance to get involved in lots of cool stuff over the next year with Encode and Algorand. With this series is not, this is kind of a popular misconception that blockchain is just for developers. It's very much not. And these are 5 of the potential backgrounds you may have coming into blockchain, but it's certainly not an exhaustive list. And that there is a role for economists, lawyers, scientists, artists, many, many more, mathematicians, those who study any humanities, linguists. There's many things that get involved. Just the kind of way I would think about it is think of the exhaustive list of things you could do with the internet and mobile now, and how many jobs are created because of that, and they're not just for developers. So the same should apply to blockchain over the next few years. So there's a fantastic opportunity for anyone, and we hope this series, and there are events designed this series to teach everyone from different backgrounds across the various events. What happens now is great, but what happens afterwards is arguably even more important. So these are 4 of the things I think you could do amid a few others. In general, we want you to learn new skills about blockchain, about Algorand, take this into the workplace. We'd love to see a lot of you become ambassadors within the Algorand ecosystem, and I know a lot of you that are involved in the hackathon and accelerator have gone on to do just that. We want you to get jobs if you're looking for a job and get hired in the space. And for those of you that have projects that want to go kind of the full way, we want you to get funding from us, from Algorand, from various partners, and certainly the opportunities are there for you. The Discord, I've pasted it in the chat already, but the Discord is a place to chat about Algorand, about anything on blockchain, ask any questions. So please do get involved. I'm also going to paste, while Addie's talking, some links about Algorand, how to get involved more specifically within the Algorand ecosystem. So yeah. And just to summarize, today is start the education series teaching about Algorand and blockchain from scratch. In a few weeks, we will be doing, across these few weeks, we'll be doing 12 events. There'll be a mixture of technical, non-technical, domain specific. Everything is fully recorded. This is a fully online series. It is going to be delivered by Algorand's team, and it's many facets of it. But all of this material will be available for you to consume on demand as well. I know a lot of you will, perhaps, particularly those for which a 5:30 UTC time slot is not quite the most optimal. These are the events. So today is the intro event. In 2 weeks' time, we have one on the Algorand consensus algorithm, and broadly explaining what a consensus algorithm is to begin with, for those of you who are like, what the hell is that? We'll then talk to you about how you set up an Algorand environment, what Algorand assets are, what Algorand smart contracts are, dApps are. Towards the second half, we'll go into some more kind of maybe business-focused stuff that isn't so deeply technical. But in general, across the 12 weeks, there'll be lots of different events you can get involved with. We want you to turn up to as many as possible. We completely understand that in an online world, you can't, so as I say, all the content is available to be consumed on demand and at your own leisure as well, whether you join live or you kind of watch the recordings back or absorb the great content we'll be producing in prose, in kind of written format to go along with the series. As I said, afterwards, there'll be a hackathon. Maybe talk about a little bit of that later. And after that, there'll be an accelerator helping you turn these hackathon projects into startups. That's my bit over and done with, the general kind of organizational kind of points. If anyone has any questions about what's to come, please do let me know. Please do a message. But I want to introduce Addie, who's Director of Technical Ecosystems and Venture at Algorand, who's going to give you a kind of a whistle-stop tour to why Algorand is great, why you should care about Algorand. So Addie, thank you so much for being with us today, and handing over to you to say more.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Anthony. So let me share my screen. Just a sec here.
Sweet.
Let me know when that works. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, it's always an adventure with Ubuntu. Like every time I do something, it doesn't work the first time, so I apologize. Let me try that again. Okay, share my screen. I always thought like a really cool art project would be if somebody could just do all the people screwing up at the beginnings of their presentations. So can everyone see my first slide okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Cool, okay. Since we're using Zoom, I can't necessarily see your questions, but what I would encourage you to do is put them in the chat window or in the Encode Club Discord channel. And hopefully myself or someone else will be looking at those, and I'll try to answer them once I kind of give you guys an overview of everything. So a little bit of background about me is I came from Parity Polkadot, where I originally was working on the substrate framework and API documentation for them. Once I went from substrate, I went into Kusama, where I was working on the NFT palette. And then last year I joined Algorand. And so I've been with the foundation for, which feels like in Corona times, probably 100 years, but it's only been about a half year now. And I'm working primarily on technical operations, on-chain governance mechanisms. And then I'm doing a lot with the accelerators and groups like Encode Club to kind of deploy and develop our ecosystem further. So I'm going to try not to lose my voice because I've been talking all afternoon, giving presentations on various things. But I wanted to give everyone sort of a really quick overview of sort of blockchain technology, because I think it's quite interesting to kind of know about where things have come from before you develop kind of where they're going and what's happening now. So blockchain technology was basically invented in 2008. It is a list of records, which are commonly referred to as nodes, which are basically connected together. And it's kind of, Bitcoin specifically was created with like the main ethos of that was to serve as a public transaction ledger, basically meaning that everything that happened on it would be available to public record. And so people could access it and see what had happened or what had been deployed. So Bitcoin was born. It was an unregulated digital currency with the main goal of kind of creating a decentralized electronic cash without the need of intermediaries while preventing any sort of double spending. And it's built on something called proof of work, which removes the need for basically a trusted third party to essentially validate the transactions. So a third party would be, for example, like a bank. As it's deployed onto the blockchain or the ledger. And that proof of work is done essentially with mining, which is based off of electricity and some other things, which I'll get into later. But it's not known to be the most environmentally friendly thing. And it's sort of one of the main sources of the mining capabilities is through things like electricity and through burning things like fossil fuel. So on one hand, there's a lot of different consensus mechanisms, which we can get into, that don't require a lot of computational power. But there are a lot of kind of blockchains that are out there like Algorand and like other kind of proof of stake blockchains, which are more sustainable or more kind of future friendly, regardless of what you think about the sustainability questions. So I want to give a little bit now kind of an overview of, I guess, Algorand specifically, but I think people are coming in from what I understand, and you're either kind of a computer scientist or an engineer, or you're maybe in management, philosophy, art, like Anthony said. And you're a student who kind of is looking at technology from a high level. So you're looking at technology from a broad perspective. And I think blockchain is very broad. It's immature, yet it's very specific in a sense. And the market is still sort of transient, and it has the ability for people to come in and deeply impact the larger blockchain ecosystem in addition to specific chains. So I would say no matter what you've studied or how it relates to blockchain, if you are interested in kind of creative problem solving or solving abstract problems with concrete skills, I find blockchain to be a really interesting space. There's a lot of us that come in from arts backgrounds or from kind of a hybrid tech background that isn't just hardcore mathematics or hardcore computer science, but there's a lot of different use cases and kind of ways that you can look at blockchain that still need a lot of attention. So I kind of want to get into Algorand. That's the whole point why everyone's here. We are basically a smart contract focused platform with the overlapping umbrella theme of decentralization. We offer better speeds of transactions, and we are a PPOS, which is a pure proof of stake. I'll get back into that in a little bit, but Bitcoin and Ethereum were sort of the founding chains of blockchain, and they use miners again to use and implement something called proof of work to essentially add blocks. But this is very expensive, like I spoke to earlier, just in terms of power and in mining. And this kind of leads towards or has a tendency to lead towards centralization of the chain because of the miners tending to conglomerate into certain areas. And so with proof of stake, those are things like Neo, Cosmos, Tezos, Polkadot. These are using consensus mechanisms to essentially get you rewards from things like staking. If you don't know what staking is an activity where a user can lock or hold funds in a cryptocurrency wallet to essentially participate in maintaining the operational aspects of the proof of stake chain. So similar to crypto mining in the sense that it helps a network achieve consensus, but it also rewards these users. Instead of being miners, they're doing it through some kind of ledger award system. So in staking, the right to validate transactions is essentially baked into how many coins are locked into a wallet. However, like the proof of work, the stakers are incentivized to constantly create new blocks or add transactions to blocks through things like rewards or returns in different things such as governance, which is a mechanism in which you kind of control the direction of the blockchain, or from locking tokens, which essentially gives you a return like an APR, or sorry, an APY would with a traditional banking or fiat system. So the next question a lot of people ask me typically is like, well, what makes Algorand different? So if you have at least one algo in your wallet, you can basically add blocks to the chain. The more tokens, the more likely it is you have the ability to make a decision, because if you hold the algos, you can stake, again, like I think right now it's between 6 and 7.5%, depending on which exchange you're staking on. You get not only the rewards, but you have the ability to, in the next few weeks, have the ability to participate in the on-chain governance, which essentially allows you to control kind of where the direction and the future of the chain goes. So with pure proof of stake, which is what Algorand is, we're essentially looking at enhanced security, and the participants are constantly selected at random using like that mechanism. So an attacker cannot know, for example, the attacker nor the system will not necessarily know what node will be elected, so that it can't necessarily attack that node. And this promotes, in my opinion, like decentralization. It's also super fast. So for example, one algo can currently do about 1,000 transactions, where a similar number of transactions on something like ETH or Ethereum would be about 5 to 10,000 USD, depending on the current mining or this current gas fees. So the TLDR is essentially that we have high block speeds and low transaction costs due to the lightweight consensus mechanisms that are splitting between the two transaction layers. So this is sort of a high view, although I would argue like also quite biased perspective, because it is developed by Algorand, and I like to remind people of that. It's sort of a decision matrix, so you can look at the different consensus mechanisms. So again, proof of work, delegated, or BPOS or PPOS, and then there's also POS, which I mentioned earlier. It's interesting, again, to note this was designed by Algorand, and since we are the pure proof of stake chain, I also recommend looking at proof of stake chains, as there's quite a lot out there as well, and I think that they can also be valuable depending on your use cases. But what Algorand specifically solves is we are using a unique staking process where no delegation is required. Since you hold the algos, you're basically participating in that mechanism. And there are other cryptocurrencies that run on the Algorand blockchain, basically, which we refer to as ASAs, or Algorand Standard Assets. So with each token having the same probability of being chosen, and with each being given this decentralization mechanism, there's basically enough validators to ensure, in my opinion, like a very broad and secure kind of cryptographic functionality. So the randomization allows for low computational requirements, which means that we have extremely fast, if maybe possibly the fastest validation mechanisms out there. And this means essentially from a business case perspective that you have a great chance of scalability, and it aids in this exponentially. So like I just spoke to earlier, there are the layer ones, which are basically what we refer to on Algorand as layer ones, are like post-sale transactions. Crowdfunding is another example, or multi-sig wallets written in teal. Multi-sig, if you don't know, is a pseudonym for multiple signature, which essentially allows multiple people to sign a wallet transaction. So that's really powerful, for example, when you're working in organizations or businesses, to have that kind of central multi-sig capacity. So teal is supported for simplified smart contracts and tokens, which run on any sort of native token. Algo token is any sort of teal contract. So the execution of this doesn't affect chain volume, which I think is also quite interesting. And then for the layer 2 aspect of the Algorand chain, I like to think of this as anything that's happening off chain. So these are executed in parallel with the blocks creation, and the certification, which basically validates the cochains, are another thing we do. So orgs can build their own blockchain accessible only by its members. And anything on that layer 2, be it machine learning or any sort of data sets or aggregations, is all being executed in parallel with the blocks development. So it's extremely fast, which I think is important when you start looking at developing projects in which you have extremely large transaction volumes or extremely large amounts of users on the chain. We're seeing that a lot right now with the NFT gold rush, I'll call it, on Ethereum, and how much that's slowing down the Ethereum mechanisms, and the gas prices are extremely high as a result because of that traffic congestion. Okay, so I want to kind of try to step back now that I've given you this very like fast 15-minute overview of sort of what we do and all the fancy things that it deploys in terms of Algorand specifically. But yeah, but I think it's important to sort of look at like the certain rules and the mechanics in which our chains function and sort of how we validate nodes. Oh, that was a weird transition. So anyways, when you look at how the blockchain works, I just want to like pull back quickly, because I realize that a lot of people are coming in from a space in which they don't necessarily have a fluent blockchain background. So blockchain basically works, or rather like how do you add a block to the literal chain in which forms a blockchain, is through kind of this multi-step process. With a normal distributed database, you have a central authority, which basically manages the data and the interactions between users. But with blockchains, there's no authority. So there's only the protocol in which that blockchain is basically implemented, and the mechanisms in which it's developed or deployed, and so on and so forth. So instead of trusting one organization, say 100%, in which a normal distributed database would function, with blockchains, you basically, for the majority of cases, you have to trust at least 51% of the people or nodes or organizations that are involved. And so one of the first questions I tend to get is sort of, how do users agree on what has to be achieved? This is essentially the consensus mechanism. It's how do you look at creating the block? It's through this majority of, i.e. 51% or more people agreeing to what has to be achieved. And when I say people, it could be nodes, it could be validators. They're different words depending on which blockchain ecosystem you're working within. But this basically relies on the supermajority and its participants via nodes in the case of Algorand. So as a whole, the security of the blockchain is tied to the majority of the chain, versus with a proof of work chain and mechanism, it's tied to a very small number. So this consensus protocol specifically can be thought of like a lottery. The more tokens you have, the more likely it is that your token, one of your tokens, will be selected to vote essentially on a block. And I would think of it as like one token equals one vote, or one win per approved block. And we use something called VRF, which is a verifiable random function, which can be executed on any node and basically is verified by a cryptographic signature protocol or proof, which then gets propagated to any existing valid node. And the selection, again, is super fast and computationally defined. So any additional node or block that is added to the chain will not slow that down. But another thing to note is like, so there's the initial transaction that has to occur. So two parties, Alice and Bob, we're gonna go with the classics, basically agree to exchange a token, a coin, an NFT, whatever it is on chain. Then that goes to aggregation of agreements that are in a queue that then create the new block, which is typically referred to as verification. That then goes to consensus. That then creates the block, and then goes to basically a receipt, which I would refer to as a hash, and is a very unique set of numbers that is not repeated typically, which then verifies that it's mathematically or computationally valid. And that hash then is then sent to the two parties which started it all, and that's how you would go through like one transaction on a block. The one thing I've come back time and time again to with Algorand as well is like how many SDKs we are actively supporting. So we have right now Java, Python, Go, Java, Rust, and PyTeal. Within these that are supported within the community and Algorand officially, we have within the Algorand Discord, each SDK has its own sub rooms. So you can basically go in there, and we have multiple people who are constantly kind of not only the head developers, but we have a developer evangelist and people like myself or other researchers in the team who are actively kind of monitoring those to offer support. So the community is really robust and very eager to help and support any sort of roadblocks you have. And we've also got something that is called developer office hours. And I think they're every week on Thursday. I have to check the time, but Jason is in the Discord constantly, pushes those out under our announcements, so you can see when those are. And if you have any questions, you can basically go to those, and himself or one of the other developer evangelists are available for any sort of questions or issues you might have. So the next thing I like to cover is from a foundational perspective. One of the things the foundation does that separates us from the Inc. side of Algorand is that we do funding without dilution, meaning that we offer money without asking for any percentage of the company or business in which you're starting. So it's a really great opportunity for people who are starting out or just getting out of school who need money or seed to essentially get something started, and they're wanting to develop on Algorand, but they don't necessarily have the capacity to do it without some sort of funding. So I like to cover this whenever I'm talking to students or people who are kind of freshly out of school or maybe thinking about changing directions or whatever brings you to this discussion. But I kind of look at it from different perspectives. So like this is another question people tend to ask, and I like to try to circumvent it ahead of time, is what are ways I can get funding through Algorand and through the Algorand Foundation? So we have different tiers. I would consider like bounties to be sort of the entry point in which if you're Algorand curious or you kind of want to start doing small tasks and kind of check out the ecosystem, look at the docs, figure out what it is that you want to do. Bounties is a really good place to start. You can basically work on small tasks. Some are like very quick, some are much more complex, and then you can get a bounty paid in algos. And you can kind of decide if you want to go on from there. Dev awards is sort of the next step from there. These are things that have to be fully finished in terms of being on the testnet or the mainnet of Algorand, and it has to be deployable in the sense that you have to be able to demo it for us live. So it needs to be working, but you can basically submit anything that you've already created for a dev award and receive some sort of award if it's viable and functional. Then there's things like grants, which is a little bit more complex. I kind of like to think of grants as something between seed funding and an angel fund, in the sense that we tend to fund multiple sorts of things, from research to apps to DeFi to bringing projects that are pre-existing on other ecosystems and developing them onto Algorand. So we're looking at things that drive mainstream adoption or allow people to join the community from other ecosystems, or maybe you're chain agnostic, and that's something that we also consider. So grants is sort of an in-between of like bounties and accelerators. And it's accelerators tend to be things where we're looking at people who are at early stage seed funding, and they're kind of doing this more or less full time, usually as a group, and usually they have a pretty viable business model, and they might even have some initial funding. And then we do things which are sort of in between, which is like Encode Club, for example, where we are right now, or Berkeley Blockchain Accelerator, where they tend to be sort of think tank ecosystem based models to drive you into either an accelerator or into the grants program. And so we try to create a lot of different avenues in which we can support projects and developers. In addition, people that apply for grants and then decide to reapply or need further funding, we've also supported that. We also have a lot of VC partners or venture capital partners worldwide who we work with, who are also always pretty much exclusively looking for Algorand projects. So one of the other things I do quite a lot is I work with them to identify projects that either need funding or are applying to kind of look at the technical viability of those, as well as like from a business perspective / use case, and then fund those. Those typically though come with like an equity ask. So that's the one kind of stipulation I like to throw out there before people ask any questions. And then the next question I usually get is, what are some projects we've supported? So we've done everything from Planet Watch, which is basically an IoT sensor that is decentralized, and I would consider it almost like a peer-to-peer development for hardware, which looks at air quality sensors and then writes that to the blockchain and directly correlates reward contributions to people who are running them. There's Uncommon Creative, which I would like to call the Airbnb of freelance. So it basically works as kind of a middleman between a freelancer and the person hiring them to protect both the person hiring and the freelancer to ensure that the work is done. It is up to whatever the specifications were, and most importantly, the freelancer gets paid on time. And then we've done other projects like the blockchain research initiatives in Rwanda, which is looking at large-scale blockchain adaptation from a research perspective. And then we've done things like the Trust Journal, which is for people to basically distribute around schools and teach kids about blockchain. So there's really like quite a gauntlet in terms of projects we've supported and sort of directions you can go. And if you are interested in funding, I highly recommend looking into kind of what we have available at the foundation. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me specifically. I'm on Discord and quite active on social media as well as email. This is my direct contact information. And then I'm going to go back to or revert back to the Zoom and see if there's any questions there I can answer. So
awesome. Yeah, there's quite a few.
Cool. Okay. Nice. I see 21 new messages, so that's dope. So what technical events do we have planned? I assume that's actually for you, Anthony.
What non-technical events do we have planned? Well, depending on the appetite, I would love to do a kind of legal focused event, a specific decentralized finance focused event, and a few other things. It depends what everyone is kind of interested in. We have the first 6 events completely planned. After that, we're going to kind of take a blank canvas and see what people are asking for. So if you do have any specific things you're kind of interested in, do let us know, and we'll see if we can kind of include it in the programming.
Cool. So the next question I see here is, can you talk about how blockchains can come or be more sustainable? So one of the topics that has come up recently, as in the last 2 weeks, has been everything around the NFT markets and the non-fungible tokens, for those of you who are about to ask. And these are essentially, you can think of these as smart contracts that are non-divisible for the most case. So it would be, and it's a unique item. So each one is addressed specifically to an item, which is then written to the blockchain. So right now, like the thing that's popping in the ecosystems is MBA smart, oh gosh, does anyone know what this is called?
MBA.
Yeah, thank you. And then the other one is things like Nifty, Super Rare, which is essentially like a gauntlet of, I would classify kind of crypto native digital arts, which you can essentially buy using Ethereum tokens. And so the big debate with this has been that proof of work is not a sustainable, and it's sort of a power hungry in the sense of how much energy is consumed to create or deploy things onto the blockchains. And they're using something which they refer to as gas, and this is basically paying for that computational power. And that computational power is done by miners, which is essentially using enormous amounts of electricity to mine the new blocks. And so one way that you can make blockchains more sustainable is by moving to a proof of stake chain. So again, I spoke about this really briefly, but it's things like Neo, Tezos, Polkadot, Kusama, Algorand, I would consider also sort of under that umbrella, although we are PPOS, it's slightly different. The underlying mechanism is more or less, in terms of environmental standpoint, computationally and environmentally friendly. So there's a lot of people who are currently looking at pivoting from Ethereum or Bitcoin as a result of that kind of lack of sustainability to a POS based chain. And so if you just Google proof of stake chains, you'll find a huge kind of option base, and they're all, again, like depending on your use case, there's different chains I would go to for different reasons, regardless of why Algorand might be the best. So why did I get involved in blockchain? Why I got involved in blockchain? I got involved actually about 2000. The first time I got involved in it was when I heard about Bitcoin, and that was in 2011, 12. I was mostly interested in the fact that I was really unhappy with the high fees that were involved in international banking, because at the time I was going quite a lot between the US and other countries, and every time I would travel or do anything, I got penalized with different fees that were extremely high, ranging from like $35 a transaction to $100 a transaction by the banks I was using. And so I was quite fascinated by kind of this decentralized model of what or how money could be reinterpreted from like a peer-to-peer standpoint. And so that was sort of my first entry point. And then I kind of fell out of it. I was a lot into the peer-to-peer networks and systems and torrenting culture. And then I started looking again into blockchain, specifically around 2018. I started looking at NFTs as sort of a mechanism for creative transactions from a peer-to-peer standpoint. So how does Algorand prevent whales or founders from controlling governance? So governance hasn't been officially deployed yet, but the vision is sort of based on the representation of our long-term algo dynamics, which let me just pull up and I'll post into the chat because it's going to be impossible for me to explain that in any short amount of time, that we just recently published a few months ago. But basically anyone who's willing to become an Algorand governor can participate in the forthcoming decisions, in our economic policies, and in kind of in the distribution of funds from an ongoing basis, both in terms of how things like the foundation are funded, but also in terms of how rewards, for example, will be deployed. So I'm going to paste that in the comment section here for you to look at. And that goes really extensively into kind of those prevention mechanisms for encouraging the decentralization to ensure that, again, like whales aren't basically completely controlling the chain or the governance of it. This is extremely biased. Yeah, you're right, because it's for Algorand. Can you explain how NFTs work in relation to art on the blockchain? So the way NFTs have traditionally worked in art is that, or I should say the way art has traditionally worked in like a gallery-based commercial space is that when a piece of art was sold, you would give the collector or the auction house something called a COA, which is a certificate of authenticity. And this was essentially, I don't think I have anything that looks like it, but let's pretend this is it. It's essentially a piece of paper, and it will have all the information of the collector, your signature, and then it will have an image of the work with information about what the work is and the edition in which they bought. But this, in my opinion, is like a very easy thing to fraudulate. And so an NFT, the original kind of use case for an NFT, from what I know, is that it would allow you to write and timestamp computationally to the chain that COA or certificate of authenticity to essentially validate the validity of a piece of art. And then that has gone further to tying in the specific titles or file types in which that piece is being done. So a lot of what's happening with NFTs is digital. So it will be like Algorand.gif, and then that exact file name will then be tied with including the metadata of that file. So the metadata is things like the time of creation, where it was created, who created it, what the machine was called that created it, and maybe some kind of timestamp of creation. That's all then tied to the NFT, in which is then sold in these platforms or auctions. How does Algorand compete with Hashgraph? Okay, maybe you can retype that one. How do we know Algorand solves security, decentralization, and scale if it doesn't have that many users? I meant since it doesn't have the same number as Ethereum. So Algorand's interesting because the cryptographers who are working as researchers at Algorand are already thinking about things like how to solve key distribution in a post-quantum cryptographic space. So they're thinking basically 5 years ahead of when computers are no longer looking to solve things from a binary standpoint, but they're looking at things, they're looking at ways to, for example, what's a really concrete example? Right now, something that they've just recently created is a way to rotate the cryptographic signatures so that they are rotating on the private side to still match with the public side. This makes, for example, things like hacking that specific key almost possible from a hacker standpoint, at least from my opinion, because those numbers are constantly changing. Last time I checked, it had 10 million. Okay, that person answered it. Thank you for answering it. What is a private blockchain, and are blockchains safe? So a private blockchain would be one that's not necessarily accessible from a public standpoint. Let me see if I can come up with a really good example of like what the private blockchain would be for me. I mean, I would say like in general, a private blockchain would be an invitation only blockchain. So you would need maybe a passphrase or a login, and then it is governed by a single entity. So it might be a blockchain, for example, that would be run by a bank would be a really good example. You would need permission essentially to read it, write it, read or write it, meaning that if you want to put anything on it or you want to see it, you basically would need some sort of like password or some protection layer to keep the data confidential. Or with a public blockchain, most of those things you can look at from a any sort of like Algo Explorer or any sort of chain explorer. What types of jobs are available in blockchain? I would say some of the most in-demand jobs are things right now like project managers, but also developers. And there's a lot of people, there's a huge need for people who are looking at things from a business development standpoint so that you have a high level understanding, meaning that you have a general understanding of what blockchains do, but you have a much more detailed understanding of things like finance use cases. You might be able to be, really good at writing decks. Those kind of skills are highly needed right now. I've noticed, especially with a lot of the venture capital partners and venture groups I'm working with, the majority of those people are coming in with extremely detailed like MBA backgrounds and a lot of experience in venture, but they don't necessarily have the technical understanding to understand what's physically what's computationally possible to implement on a blockchain. So that's really a really good combination to have, is if you can understand sort of one and the other. Why did I leave Parity to join Algorand? So this is getting juicy. So hold on one second. Is the recording available? Oh wait, sorry, I missed a bunch. I'm gonna get back to the juicy question in a second. The blockchain question I got, how many grants do you support per month? I would say right now it's anywhere from 20 to 50. And in general, those grant awards, those grant awards, I would say go from anywhere from around 30,000 USD to up to 400,000 USD. Over that, I tend to refer people to one of the venture groups or one of the accelerators in which we work with. And we have accelerators in Asia Europe and South America and Latin America right now, and we're looking at doing one in the US in addition. How does Algorand avoid the problems of Ethereum in reference to gas? So because it's a pure proof of stake or a proof of stake, those are essentially circumvent the need for gas fees. My favorite crypto project. I assume you mean like specifically and not as a blockchain. I mean, I think my favorite crypto project is kind of, I mean, CryptoKitties is the first thing that came to mind. I want to have something cooler, but that's the best I can do, sorry. Is this being recorded and will be available on a later date? Yes. Is Algorand working on any cross-chain bridges? Yes. Right now, I have a team that's actively working on an Ethereum bridge, Uniswap, Bitcoin, and Polkadot. Why did you leave Parity to join Algorand? So I met the head of the research, the cryptographic research, whose name is Tal. She's now an advisor for Algorand, but she was the head of the IBM cryptographic research lab for like 20 years before she joined Algorand. I had met her when I was at Parity, and then I met one of the other cryptographic research members, and I hadn't actually heard of Algorand. But what happened was, as I started looking into the tech and the mechanics and the team, and I was so blown away by how insanely brilliant and how insanely forward-thinking they were, and how they were solving a lot of the questions around the blockchain trilemma, which is like looking at scalability, decentralization, and security in ways that I haven't seen any other chains approach that. And so that made me really excited for the project. And when I realized how young Algorand was relative to other projects, so Algorand's about 2 years old now, maybe, and how far they have come in that short amount of time, I was really eager to work with them. Is there a MetaMask-like service for Algorand? So that's another thing that I've been working on since I got here. One of the things I really love about Ethereum is the ability to use things like MetaMask and Uniswap. And I felt that that's something that's really lacking in the Algorand ecosystem. So I've been actively sort of, I don't want to say poaching, but poaching and sort of identifying projects in which I think would really benefit from the fast transaction times and the low transaction costs of Algorand and bringing them into the ecosystem. I assume you have to stake to get votes. I think you're speaking to on-chain governance, and I assume, I'm going to assume that's what you're saying. You basically just have to hold algos. So if you want to participate, we're going to release the governance proposal and sort of the on-chain mechanics of that. I'm hoping this week. We were hoping to do it last week, but there was a little bit of some snafus to get some people on board. But the paper is pretty much done, and the goal getting it out is on Friday, so that will all be in there. Do NFTs work cross blockchain? So right now, each kind of NFT works within its own blockchain ecosystem. But what, again, like the biasness of me being an Algorand is, one of the things I'm working on is getting a bridge that actively allows you to, a bridge is something which is just that. It allows you to basically migrate from one chain to another in a rather seamless way. So you basically have what I would refer to as interoperability, meaning that you can work with either chains. So right now I'm working with a team to develop a mechanism which allows you to take all your NFTs from Ethereum and bring them over to Algorand, and then host them within Algorand so that you don't have to pay all these high gas fees when you're buying, trading, or posting them. I've heard crypto is quite a masculine place. Yes. Is this the case? Yes. So the prior company I worked at, there was about 250 people at that company, and there was probably 3 women. Algorand is actually, with the foundation, we are almost exactly 50-50, interestingly enough. And I would say it depends a lot on what chain it is, but for the most case, it is rather masculine / bro-centric. But with that being said, there's a lot of room for people to come in. How would fees work for co-chains? Would they need to use algos? I think that depends on the use case. I mean, no, but it depends on how they decided to implement that from an app standpoint. Can you talk about why Algorand doesn't offer rewards for new relay participation nodes like Ethereum or Cardano? Why is the network going to grow without this incentive? So we offer rewards for, we don't have participation node rewards, but we do have staking rewards. So right now the staking rewards, I think depending on the exchange or the wallet, is between 6, and I think Binance might be almost 8%. So the idea is that if you hold algos, you can reap those rewards. Why doesn't, okay, that was the same question, emphasize, yes. Can you explain how, oh wait, shoot, that jumped. Fees for blockchain, co-chains answered that. What do you think about Polkadot? I think Polkadot is actually a really interesting ecosystem, and I really enjoy, so they have something called parachains, which is essentially there's like the main overlaying Polkadot layer kind of umbrella, and then they have all these parachains which run under it. They have had some issues with security and breaches in the past, so that is something I would mention, but overall, I think it's an interesting project. How long does it take to get a grant? So right now, I would say the average turnaround and response time is probably anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. We're currently migrating and porting the grants system to a completely different thing, which doesn't affect anything from the front end, but from the back end, it's a little bit slower. So part of that is due to that. But we're hoping to get that down to 1 week, start of Q2. What happened to my question about parity to Algorand? Oh, I answered that one. If you did, if you're still curious, feel free to DM me. I'm happy to spill gossip and juice. So for the answer to the private blockchain, this person just wants to add a comment. For the private open blockchain example, I think a COVID health passport where only permissioned labs can write, but any airline, for example, could read, would be a good example. Yes, I agree. What is the Algorand ecosystem lacking right now? So things that I've specifically started looking for is DeFi projects, bridges. I'm also looking for stable coins. One of the other people working with me is actively sort of looking for any sort of stable coins to bring on exchanges, NFT sites, and platform development. And then I would say anything else that sort of brings in some sort of social or kind of goodwill like cause. So we have quite a few people who are interested in sort of education, things that benefit areas of the diaspora, or things like, for example, one really interesting project we just funded was for deforestation and looking at ways to prevent and incentivize farmers in areas of tropical areas to kind of protect their forests or jungles instead of having those go to large timber lots and so on. Hold on, sorry, there's so many questions I'm trying to keep up. What type of jobs? Okay, I answered that one. You guys are into the parody Algorand gossip. Can we please try to put something together for my high school students in New York City? No one is doing this. How can we connect? So if you write me on Discord, you just look for my name, Addie, A-D-D-I-E. Any sort of social media I'm on, or you can connect directly with Anthony or myself. My email address is addie@algorand.foundation. And I'm happy to put you in touch with people who are doing kind of the educational initiatives and get that set up for you. Someone recommends She256 is a great project for women in blockchain. I've heard that as well, because the ratio is worse in engineering schools, I guess. What sort of challenges will there be in the hackathon and who can participate? That would be a question for Anthony.
Yeah. So anyone can participate. In general, it will be mainly aimed at those coming out of the universities, but our general rule is if you want to participate, we will never turn you away. Challenges will be everything from basic tutorials on how to get started to Algorand to building very cool DeFi and NFT applications. We're going to have many, many, many. It will be a purely Algorand hackathon, so we can be very creative with the different challenges. We'll announce more on that as we get closer to the summer.
And then there's another question: how can I get Encode Club involved in my university?
You can email me and we'll be happy to sort that out. There's a lot of questions.
Why are there no big NFT marketplaces currently on Algorand blockchain where everyone is using Ethereum? Well, so it was because basically Ethereum was sort of the first space in which NFTs were deployed. And so part of that is just because it happened to be the first. There's actually 6 NFT sites that I know of right now that are being developed within Algorand. And then we have the bridges that will then kind of remedy or allow you to sort of circumvent and move, basically migrate anything that you have from an NFT-based wallet like MetaMask. It will allow you then to migrate that into something like Alpha Signer. Do we offer internships or summer jobs? We've actually been talking about doing internships, and so I would suggest you to reach out to me, and I'll keep you posted on that. Can you elaborate on Silvio's relation to MIT's digital currency initiative? Interesting. I'm not sure that I'm aware of exactly what his relationship is to that. I mean, he is from MIT, but whether he's actually participating in that, I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that for you. Where do I see blockchain in 5 years? So I would say, oh, someone just said he is a collaborator on the DIC. So thank you, participant 33. Where do you see blockchain in 5 years? I would say right now we're just at sort of the beginning of what is possible. And because computationally, we haven't had the ability to do a lot of the things that we have now found as possible with things like cloud computing, I think we're just at the beginning. And so if we look at blockchain in 5 years from now, I don't even know if I can prophesize what is possible, because I see it being such a different space and so many things will have changed at that point. And yeah, Anthony shared my email address. Feel free to reach out to me. Social media is faster because I just have a better response time, but I am quite available on email, and I do encourage you to reach out to me. And then the final question was, I'm a researcher at ATH Zurich. What opportunities are there for researchers within the Algorand ecosystem? So I would reference grants as a great opportunity if you're wanting to do your own research. And then we also have a really large research team that's doing a lot of the on-chain work with both the cryptographic functions, the governance functions, all that sort of stuff. If you want to ping me, I'm more than happy to get you in the right direction with the right researchers who would be happy to speak to you or find ways that we can work together. So I think that's it from my point. I appreciate everyone sitting in and asking all the questions. And if there's anything else I haven't had a chance to answer, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Well, Addie, thank you very much. Also, well done for powering through those questions. That was impressive, actually. Right, just to finish on my end, actually, we've just gone over the hour. Let's see if that loads. Hopefully my screen's now visible. The next event is in 2 weeks. We're going to go into a deep dive with Hai Chao, also from the Algorand Foundation, on Algorand consensus algorithm. Well, that should say, well, algorithm, the Algorand consensus algorithm. That's 2 weeks today, same time slot, everyone. So if you do have any questions in the meantime, feel free to join us on the Discord. Yeah, we've shared a lot of resources in chat as well, so please do check those out. But Addie, thank you so much for your time this evening and for such a thorough and whistle-stop tour through Algorand. So we greatly appreciate it, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your questions and sitting through it. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to speaking to some of you in the near future.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Thank you all for joining. Recording will be up tomorrow morning. So see you all soon. Thanks all. Have a good evening.